speak in opposition to House Bill 1464. Several provisions in this bill really are written so loosely and the language is so poor that there's really not a way to comply with this bill. There's really not a way to know if you are complying with the bill. I want to first draw your attention to Section 12, line 745 through line 751, and I'll read the section. No ballots shall be handled without a poll official being present and without documentation on the chain of custody documentation forms of who is handling such ballots and when and why such ballots are being handled. After the activity requiring the handling of ballots is completed, such ballots shall be resealed in ballot boxes or other secure containers, which shall be recorded and witnessed on chain of custody documentation forms as specified by the Secretary of State and shall be signed by the persons having custody of such ballots. This section is something that I brought up in committee when we saw this provision in a separate bill that came through governmental affairs. The language is written so loosely, and it's requiring you to have a poll official present when ballots are being handled. What does the word handled mean? When you look up the word handled in the dictionary, it says to feel or manipulate with hands. Or a second definition is to manage a situation or a problem. So what are we talking about here? Are we saying that you've got to have a poll official available if you touch a ballot, if you move a ballot? I mean, literally, if you pick up a ballot that falls on the floor, do you have to call a poll official to supervise that? When we're talking about elections, it's really important that we have language that is concise because we know what happens when you have loose language in bills. What happens is prosecution is subjective. And that's when we start to see that when black and brown voters exercise their power and it's effective, we start to see more prosecutions.
Oof. Welcome back to the Nomiki Show. It is Solidarity Wednesday. As always, I am so grateful to have our dear friend Benjamin Dixon joining us from the Benjamin Dixon Show, who I joined this morning for a great conversation. Thank you for having me, by the way.
Always a pleasure.
Very excited. The star of that last video is. We're very honored to have her join us today, Representative Renitta Shannon. She is a member of the Georgia House of Representatives in District 84 and a candidate for Lieutenant Governor. Representative Shannon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for thank you for allowing me to be here.
Of course. So we just saw you part of your speech, and we'll put the link up so people can watch the full speech from the floor in reaction to this new bill. And I curious, what is their intention with this? But what is the argument they're trying to make?
So it's a few things, and this is actually the second voter suppression bill or bill that is determined to destroy our elections in Georgia that we've seen come from the Republicans. And really, the root of all of these bills is really just one thing. They want to relitigate the 2020 election. And so this bill that we see now is really to try to satisfy these people who just cannot understand that Donald Trump lost the 2020 presidential election because he simply did not get enough votes. And so what you are seeing are attacks on mostly black and brown voters for having shown up to the ballot box and unelected and failed to allow him to be reelected. It's because black and brown voters have shown up and exercised their political power that we are seeing all these bills come through that don't even make any sense. As I pointed out in my speech, the language is so poor, there's no way to even know if you're complying with these new election bills.
So what is their subtle intention? We know so they want to obviously disenfranchise black and brown voters. When you're talking to colleagues on the floor, if you are talking to colleagues on the floor, when you say that to them, how do they respond?
They really are in their own bubble. They really do believe that there was some type of fraud in the election. So they really just can't conceive that people would show up and not reelect Donald Trump. So that's part of it. The other part is they really just want to satisfy their base. And that's what, most of this is about. So this bill is very similar to the media that you're seeing around the Florida bill where they want to have an election police. This bill brings in the GBI to pretty much be our election force. So it's just a coordinated effort across the country of Republicans trying to relitigate this election and trying to make sure that we intimidate black and brown voters into not being able to vote.
Ben, you're in Georgia. You organize in Georgia. You have lots of folks on from Georgia. How do folks feel on the ground? Like, it almost seems like it's just too much at once.
I'll tell you, people people are really upset, including groups that we've never seen really upset about election bills. Because as I pointed out last year, when we saw the big voter suppression bill pass through, their intention is to target Black and brown voters, but really these voter suppression bills hurt everybody. So I just got a call yesterday from some seniors in my district, a predominantly white assisted living facility, a group of seniors who their old process was that when it came time to vote, they would have the office manager fax in the request for absentee ballots, and then they would fill out their absentee ballot, and then they would have the office manager return ballots for them. Because of the last voter suppression bill that we saw pass, all of that is now illegal. So these seniors are sitting around trying to figure out how to vote. So to answer your question, we are seeing people who previously did not even have were not being targeted by these election bills, who are now asking the opposition about how bad these bills are, because they also are feeling the ramifications of what just legislation that just doesn't make sense.
Yes, Nomiki, I was, and good afternoon to you both. I think one of the feelings I get from this is the idea that Black and brown voters are resilient, and we are, and we can and shall overcome. But if you have to ask, like the sentiment is that the people on the ground are consistently having to out organize the voter suppression tactics of Republicans, and we sure could use a little bit of help from the federal level to help stop some of this that is happening in real time right in front of our eyes.
When you say federal level, you mean the actual U.S. government, or does it also mean maybe like the party level?
Well, actually, all the above, right? So we're still waiting on the Democratic Party to do something about voting rights on the federal level to help prevent some of this type of intrusion into the voting rights on the state level. Georgia, along with several other states, are beneficiaries of Shelby versus Holder being gutted. And so now they're able to do these types of games without having to check with the Department of Justice. And so it would be nice if the Democratic Party, the federal government, and anyone who actually likes democracy would stop these Republicans for kind of a change,
Representative Shannon, this is not the only bill like this, and you mentioned that. Can you just list off some of the other stuff that they've presented that could affect this election this year, the election that you're in, for instance?
So SB 202 was a major voter suppression bill that made national coverage that we saw pass in Georgia. But there are a lot of provisions within that bill so that people focused on previously. They focused on the things like not being able to give voters standing in line water or snacks if they are standing in long lines. But there are other provisions in the bill that have already taken effect, and we've already seen elections happen under these suppressive bills. So, for example, the Atlanta municipal elections were some of the first elections that took place after SB 202 was passed. That bill also had a provision in it where it basically said if you show up to the wrong voting location and you try to vote with a provisional ballot, if there are certain hours within the day that if you show up during that time, that provisional ballot will be thrown away. Your vote will be thrown away. And you don't yes, Ben, I see your face. Yes. And this stuff, it just makes no sense. And so again, it's really it's interesting because in 2016, when Hillary Clinton lost the election, folks on the left just understood not enough people voted for her.
Right.
And it's really the same thing that we're seeing with them trying to relitigate this election. I don't understand what is the reason that they can't understand not enough people showed up and voted for Donald Trump. People didn't like the way that he ran the country. They didn't like how he neglected his duties around COVID. People did not want to vote for that. And that's it. He lost because not enough people showed up and voted for him. That's the
well, I think we know what it's really about. But I mean, because never let a crisis go to waste. So the Republicans, of course, are going to use this to strike out so many of their culture wars, voter suppression, modeling it for other states, modeling for the federal level for all we know. How do you see this kind of playing out on their side? Because when our side gets frustrated because of these things, naturally so, their side somehow it becomes dangerous. Are we feeling like that's happening? I'll ask both of you because you're on the ground.
So we've already seen some of this play out because they keep talking about that there's fraud in the elections. That was one of the reasons why Democrats were able to gain the two U.S. Senate
Mhm.
seats here in Georgia because their voters are believing what their elected representatives are telling them that there's fraud in these elections. So their voters are saying, well, then why should I even bother to turn out? And so
Mm,
it's a never-ending stream of them dragging, Georgia's code through a bunch of nonsense to try to satisfy people who will never be satisfied because these
that's right.
people, I still get emails of
Oh
people saying
no.
throw out the 2020 election, invalidate the electors, and pretty much redo the election. I got one yesterday, actually. I'm still
So
receiving
sorry.
emails from their voters saying that. I'm not kidding. Mhm.
Mm. Nomiki, I'm listening to Representative Shannon, and it's amazing what they can get away with when they manufacture consent alongside hysteria. They have whipped up a lot of hysteria around the idea that it's impossible for Donald Trump to have lost that election, and they know it's a lie. I just want to start with every Republican who's an elected official knows that that is a lie, but they'll play dumb. They'll play concerned as if they really care about democracy. But at the end of the day, they know that if they whip up their base into a frenzy enough, they can get actual electoral results based on the false claim of voter fraud.
I all right. Well, final thoughts here. I know you don't have a lot of time. You're very busy. Representative Shannon, where is this going to go? Do you think that they're actually going to win at this level, or is this just sort of a tool to get people angry?
I do not think so that they will win on this because, like I said before, it's hurting their voters. And
Mm,
the regressive legislation that we've seen in Georgia, which is really creating a harsh reality for so many Georgians, is the reason why I'm running for lieutenant governor. Because we have had so much nonsense legislation come through the General Assembly that does nothing to make the lives of Georgians better, and so it's one of the reasons that I'm running. But to Ben's point, where is this going to go? What he said was true and accurate, which is that Democrats at the federal level have got to get this done. I was one of the
Mhm.
first people to say early on when the Biden administration took over, was just that we need a new Voting Rights Act, and we need to make sure that
mm.
everybody's right is secure to vote, particularly in states like Georgia. So Democrats have got to get this done.
Yep. Ben, do you have any final questions?
I actually no question. I'm just excited about Representative Shannon having you on the show on our morning show this week coming up. And I did not know. I'm sure it is in my notes somewhere, so I'm not going to blame my producer. But I'm excited to hear that you're running for lieutenant governor. I'm looking forward to discussing that with you when you come on.
Thank you.
Very much so. Love to have you back on. I'm sure there's going to be more developments. Representative Shannon, good luck. Stay safe. Keep fighting the fight. We're really grateful for having you
Yes.
today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you haven't already, make sure to join us on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. Our patrons are what keep this show alive and well. It's how we can do it on the road when I'm filming other stuff. It is patrons who keep us going.